I'd like to thank the grace of heaven, the virtues of the masters, and the compassion and mercy of the grand predecessors, senior transmitters, lecturers, temple masters, and everyone for giving me this opportunity today to give the first class of the Lunar New Year of the Dao of Jing, chapter 66. Okay, so this is the overview. You guys can see it, right? Chapter 66. It's called, well, the main title, the primary title is called River. So let's continue. This is it's about average length chapter. Okay, so he's talking about rivers and oceans. Yeah, he's giving us a geography lesson. No, anyway, all right. And the subtitle is the secondary title is "Goodness Stays Low." So that's what he's hinting at. And this is not the first time that he's talking about rivers or oceans or water in general, right? It's not the first time. This is probably the third or fourth time. Okay. All right. So it's divided into three sections. First section is the thesis, the premise. He's giving the proposition, you can say. And then the next two sections, it's divided into four sections. The next two sections from lines 4 through 11 is the analysis. He's giving us his rationale, okay, for that thesis. And then the last three lines, 12 through 14, is the conclusion. All right. Okay. So hopefully we could go through this in about 70 minutes or less. Okay. 75 minutes. All right. Okay. Let's start. Here's the outline. All right. Okay. So the reason why rivers and oceans can be those kings of 100 valleys is because of their goodness in staying low. So they can be kings of 100 valleys. All right. So, valleys and oceans and rivers, what's have to do with Tao, right? Okay. There are a lot of metaphors. Hopefully by now you realize that the Tao Te Ching, every chapter is full of metaphors. Okay. It's not direct literal meanings. Okay. I mean, a lot of those chapters have literal meanings. That's true. But that's a very, you can say, superficial. Actually, they have more higher level metaphorical meanings. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's look at the ocean. Okay. So, this means river. Okay. Large river, especially large river, but it's a metaphor for rulers. Okay. So yeah, that's a river is a metaphor for rulers. Then the ocean. Okay. The ocean. It's on the physical level, it's a metaphor for the highest ruler, the emperor. Okay. All right. On the metaphysical level, it's the metaphor for the Tao. It's like a symbology for the Tao. Okay. So like the ocean where all the valley streams and rivers flow to, right? Okay. That's what the ocean is. So that's, and this is a direct reference to an example for the existence of Tao in the world is like valley streams that run into rivers and oceans. All right, that's chapter 32. Okay, I think it's the last phrase. Okay, last line. All right. Okay. So let's see. What's another meaning? Okay. Well, we should understand what the king means. Okay, there's a physical meaning, superficial meaning. Yeah, it's a king. Yeah, it's a king. I mean, yeah. Okay, but there's a Tao meaning or metaphor for the king, or the king who transcended the three realms. Okay, so that's one. Okay, so that's from chapter 16. All right, impartiality is sovereign's heaven, heaven's Tao. All right, okay, so chapter 16. All right, okay, yeah, this chapter is going to have a lot of references to previous chapters. All right, okay, then there's a personal level of the king. That's the second half. This is more the functional aspect. Okay, the first one is the more essence, the essence side. Okay, this one is the function side. Okay, which is the manifestation side of the Tao. Is that it's it's our sage's innate virtues. Okay, and the external moral conduct, all the external things. Okay, all right. So all right. Okay, let's see. That's the basic meaning is of the first line is that At the kingdom level, this is the physical, worldly level, phenomenal level, like the numerous valleys, okay, and regional rivers, regional rulers. So the valleys represent subjects, okay, people, all right, and regional rulers paying tribute. That's the water, that's the flowing water to the king. Okay, the water in the valley flows into the rivers and oceans. Okay, so another meaning is the river flows through the lowest central part of the valley, but the ocean is even lower than the rivers. Okay, so that's that's the direct translation meaning. Okay, so metaphorically, although the emperor is the highest, highest in terms of rank, right, or status, whatever, okay, nobility, status, etc., the emperor must be the most humble. So that's the yang and the yin, all right, okay. So the greatest is also the modest, all right, similar to ruling a large kingdom is being the lowest river. That's from first phrase of chapter 61, all right, okay. So we talked about that, all right, okay. So if you notice, there's always, even though you're the highest, that's the yang, right? The yang aspect, right? Yeah, yang is always the high, right? Yang's the high, yin is the low, right? But yet, humble is the yin. It's the yin aspect. Humble versus proud, right? Or vain glory or vain vanity, humility versus vanity, right? So that's the yin part. So it's the yang and the yin. Okay. All right. So additional meaning now on a personal level. Okay. The lower you are, that is the more humble you are. The more water, that is the more goodness you have in your life, right? Because water also represents goodness. Well, we'll get to it in the next bullet point. But all right. So the vastness of the ocean is a metaphor for tolerance and compassion, on the individual level, personal. So there's no narrow-minded pettiness. Okay. It's a lot of ego, right? Pettiness drives the ego, right? In true cultivators of Tao, always accommodating of others and very broad-minded, right? Not narrow-minded, very broad-minded, not biased, etc. Okay, not offended by ideas that differ from their own, right? That comes from the appendix of the 7 virtues of water, chapter 8. All right, okay, so you guys can look that up. All right, I didn't include it in here because it's already an appendix. Okay, now let's go to the second phrase, which is, it's because of their goodness in staying low. Okay, so basic meaning. Okay, at the kingdom level, the physical level, when rulers, or the most basic level, when rulers can be humble like the ocean is the lowest, then they can be the kings of the people of the valleys. Okay, the valleys represent the people. Okay, so all the river waters flow into the vast ocean, right? So because their goodness, now this is natural, right? This is nature, right? Nature's like that. I don't know. Maybe in other planets or other universes, who knows, galaxies, you have oceans flowing into rivers. I don't know. I doubt it, right? Because by definition, okay. So anyway, all right. So because of their goodness, it's in staying the lowest. So to be skillful in staying low is to be humble. Okay. So let's go to Appendix A. What is that? What are we talking about? Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Now, even though, okay, what's being skillful? Okay, what's being skillful in staying low? What does that mean? Being skillful. You have a talent for being humble, right? That's people say you have an expertise in being humble. It doesn't mean that, okay? Or being very, how can I say, people say, oh, if you have a talent for being humble, some people say, oh, you probably lack self-confidence. That's one possibility. That's one possible, but that's a negative. That's not a good, good reason for being humble, right? Oh, I don't know anything. I'm ignorant. I have no talent. No skill. I have no education. So you kind of, or self-esteem, low self-esteem. That's one reason for people to be very humble, right? That's one possible reason, but that's a very negative, right? That's being humble for all the wrong reasons. Maybe that's another way of saying. Okay, so what is the Dao of humility? It's actually identical to what Confucius said. Now, what's being skillful, or just having a knack or talent for being humble, or for having that that disposition or that nature, that character. Okay, so what he said was this. He said, when I walk along with two others, they may serve me as my teacher. I mean, this is as my teachers. Okay, this is a bad translation, but that came directly from one of the James Legge. I don't want. Okay, so it's 三人行必有我师. Okay, that's from the Analects. That's what Confucius said. Okay, Analects. What he's saying, that's his reason. That's the better reason. You can say the better reason for being humble. Get it? Because you understand that besides you, besides your intellect, your knowledge, etc. Okay, there are people beyond you. There are definitely people. In this case, he says, walking with two other people, right? That one of them or both of them could also be my teacher. See, so that's a positive perspective or positive reason for being humble, because then you realize that, there are other people that could have more skills or better skill sets or, better knowledge, et cetera, than you, and that you can learn from them. So it just says, whenever, so the meaning of that, what is this? Whenever I see three people walking together, I know there must be someone among them who can be my teacher. So that's the positive reason, not because you're saying, I'm ignorant, so therefore, or I have low self-esteem, so therefore, so no, see, so that's the better reason. Understand? Okay, makes sense? Okay, so that's the better reason for being humble, okay, or having humility. Okay, so that's Confucius, and it makes sense, right? Okay, so that's what 善下. Okay, that's being, okay, all right, where are we? Okay, so let's look at further understanding. Oh, sorry, additional meaning. Okay, is that by being low, like the water flowing to the lowest places, is the highest goodness, virtue. Okay, so that's what we're, where I explain it right here is, here, okay, or up here, okay? So up here, right? The lower you are, the more water or goodness you have in life, okay? So that nurtures everyone, right? The water that flows through the valleys, right? The lowest places, the valleys, I mean the lowest place, right? It nurtures everyone, and yet it's without the water does it without contention, or without you can say wu or without conditions. It just flows, naturally, right? It just flows to natural. So in chapter 8, the very first phrase, it says the highest goodness is like water. Okay, so that's chapter 8. All right, so it's been a long time ago, but so that's what he's saying. So basically, he's repeating, the same ideas that he had in previous chapters. All right. Okay, so the further understanding is that at a personal level, being a king means to live up to the heavenly mandate for human beings, which means being congruent with what is natural for the best in you, which is to be of service to others, not just yourself. So it's not because of your ego, right, or greed, or ambition, etc., right? Okay, so this is the very high, how can I say, very high level of awareness and understanding of what is it to be a king. All right. Okay. So, all right. So the implication for this section is that, okay, by being congruent with the Tao, congruent, that means you are basically at one with the Tao, you flow with the Tao, you're in accordance with the Tao, you conform to the Tao, etc. Okay. All right. That is the rivers flowing to the ocean, is being a king of your life, which allows you to transcend the three realms. Okay, so this is the very ideal level, the highest level. So you are vast. That means you're tolerant, right? You can say magnanimous, etc. All that, all right? And thus can accommodate all. So by nurturing our own capacity for tolerance and the nurturing of others, we will also nurture our vast moral integrity, right? 好自然, right? 好自然正气. Sorry, 浩然正气. Sorry, 浩然正气. Okay, this is from Mencius, by the way. Okay, Mencius. Okay, Mencius. All right. Okay, so the key point is that. Let's see where. It's just kind of long. Okay. All right. Okay. So the Tao is like the ocean. That's the symbol or metaphor, right? For the ocean, the ocean is a metaphor for the Tao. All the valleys, streams, and rivers flow to. The ocean is a metaphor for the Tao, just as all rivers flow into the ocean. Ultimately, everything must return to the Tao, right? Ultimately, everything must return, right? Because like all waters of the streams and rivers returning to the ocean, you also return to the Tao. So the original true permanent home, right? That's our Tao. To be able to serve others is to apply virtue in serving others, okay? This is, okay, hold on. Okay, oops. This is to be a king of 100 valleys. That's the master of your life destiny, okay? So the valleys, instead of people on the external side, on the internal side, it represents your life, all your journey through life, okay? That's how the water flows through the valley, okay? Your turn. So, all right. So let's look at part 1 of summary about suggestions for cultivating humility. So how do we cultivate humility? Okay, so some suggestions for cultivating humility. All right. So number 1, we definitely should not talk too much. Okay. Remember, in previous chapters, at least in chapter 22, is it? Yeah, 22, 24, 32, or so, a whole bunch of those previous chapters, we talk about, talking too much. All right. We shouldn't talk too much. Okay. So we should resist the urge to speak whatever comes to mind, especially this. I mean, some people can talk a lot, fine, but at least they know what they're talking about or whatever. Okay. But if you, or at least they thought through what they're talking about, what they want to say. But if you don't, if you just speak your mind, very impulsively, right? Is it impulsively? Yeah, impulsively. Then, you can't take it back, right? That's the problem with words, right? With speech. Once it's spoken, it can't be erased, or it can't be taken back. People will hear, right? People will remember. Okay, so that's why. All right, so it's better to listen more and talk less. Once again, this is a reiteration of previous chapters. All right, okay. So 2, make it all about the other person. Yeah, it's not about you. It's not ego. Okay, so we should not be egocentric. Well, another way of saying it's selfless, more selfless. Okay. So intentionally practice having a conversation where you do not talk about yourself. Yeah. So think about it. Just imagine, that whenever we are having conversations with anybody, be it at home, at work, whatever, with our neighbors, friends, etc., socially or whatever, try to remind yourself not to talk about yourself. That's not too easy, right? That's not easy, right? It's always, oh, I did this, I have this, I try, whatever, okay? All right. So now if others ask, about you, try not to, try to avoid that, and try to, skillfully, tactfully, steer away from you, because it's not about you. Okay, because it's not about you, right? Okay, steer back. The topic is always about them, all right, about others or something else. Okay, so remember, it's not just about you, all right. So that's so this is a lesson in relinquishing our ego. Okay, so that's, obviously this has part of it too. Okay, but this is really it. Okay, this is no more okay, all right, okay. And then lastly is request feedback and really listen. Yeah, so in our conversations, so and this is tough. I think most of us rarely incorporate this in if you could do this, then you really are humble. Obviously you have to do all 3, but this is the tough part. So ask others to provide you with their honest opinions. That's, after a conversation, you ask, hey, was I talking about me too much or whatever, my accomplishments or whatever, whatever. Okay. And discover the difference between your self-image and how others see you. Right. So, so it's like a feedback, basically, try to get yourself out of that bubble, of just, your silo of just, all about you. Okay. So, all right. So lastly, remind yourself to have less ego. All right. So just, it's basically a way of self-reflecting. You can say that. This is like, self-reflection in put into practice. As an example of self-reflecting, you ask for others' feedback. So, so if others are straight direct, to you and say, hey, you know what, you use too much I in your conversations, or, it's always about you, whatever, yeah, you gotta, then it's, it's a humble way of learning about yourself and trying to be, okay. All right. So that's that. Okay. Let's go to, this is summary part 1. Let's go back. Okay. All right. So now we're on section 2 now. Let's see. Oh God. Okay. I've had a little happen. Okay. So thus sages, now we're on the section 2. Okay. First four lines. Okay. Or 4 phrases. Thus sages wishing to be over people, literally means above, okay, people, should be speaking humbly to them. Okay. Literally this means, below. Okay, that means you want to be in a lower position. Okay, so wishing to be in front of people should be placing themselves behind them. Once again, this is a repeat of one of our common themes in previous chapters. Okay, in Dao De Jing. All right. Okay, let's see. Okay, what's the basic meaning? Basic meaning is that on the external level, if sages, people, right? Sages, enlightened beings or Tao masters wish to have authority over people, or wish to, to lead them or whatever. Okay, then sages must speak humbly. Yeah, the ideal person to wield authority is a humble servant of the people. So this is very, it might be contrarian to some people, contrarian to some logic. Okay, so here another meaning is here. Okay. If sages wish to be superior, then sages must speak humbly like the inferior. So once again, it's the yang and the yin. All right. Okay. So just like if you are an emperor, remember, right? Like an emperor, you want to be, you have to be the leader, right? The top dog, right? The top ruler. But then you also have to be the most humble. That's the same idea. Just now we're talking about sages. That's the only difference. Okay. All right. So the more authority sages wield, the more humbly they must be. So you can substitute the word sages for emperor. Same idea. Okay. All right. So sages speak humbly and are in accord with the Tao principles. So people will admire and follow them because first of all, they practice what they preach, right? If they say, right? I mean, they practice what they teach. Okay. They do things naturally, without contrivance, without agenda, all that wu wei, okay, stuff like that. Okay, there's a very short story. I don't know if it's humorous. It's kind of story of George Washington and the heavy log. Okay, it's not about the cherry tree. Okay, this is very short. It's like 2-3 minutes story. Okay, so back during the Revolutionary War, right? George Washington was the commander-in-chief of the what they call the colonial army, right? Okay, fighting for independence against the British. Okay, so as a commander-in-chief, they were. I think the story goes that they were on march. They were marching from one. I think they were marching towards the to a new place in order to to fight the British Army. Okay, so and back then they don't have paved roads. They just have very narrow wagon trail roads. That's like roads. Okay, dirt roads basically. Okay, so they were marching, and he was riding on his horse, and he was surveying the process, the progress of the march, and then he came across up ahead. He noticed over, I don't know, around the bend of the trail or whatever, he noticed that there was like a backlog, and then he rode closer, and he noticed that there was a group of men trying to remove a big heavy log that had fallen on the trail, and that's kind of blocking traffic or causing congestion along the march, along the path march. So and he's noticed that there was a soldier, a commander, in charge of that group of men. It's probably a corporal or sergeant. Okay, anyway, that's commanding the men to lift, a group of men, maybe a squad or so. Okay, a group of men to lift, to move the log out of the way. so that the soldiers can march past without, any congestion. And he noticed, and the group, that squad of men were having difficulty because that tree was huge. It was a big log, big tree. And he noticed that the commander of that group, that corporal or sergeant or whatever, was just barking orders, shouting, criticizing, telling his men to, hurry up, get it done, move, push the log, get it, and not helping them, So then he rode over, and then he dismounted and went over to the corporal or sergeant and asked him, what are you guys doing? Are you guys having, having problems or something? What's the problem, basically? Okay. And the corporal says, well, I'm trying to get these bunch of, weak soldiers trying to, move this log over so we can try, and, and so, we can continue our march, without, blocking the trail. And then George Washington asked, well, why aren't you helping out? Why didn't you helping out? You're the leader, you're in charge of these men. Why aren't you helping them out? And then the corporal responded, no, I'm their leader because I'm in charge. I'm their commander, so I don't have to do that. So I just give orders. That's rank has its privileges. The status. Rank has its privileges. Then George Washington, didn't say a word. He just nodded, and he walked over to the group of men, and he asked others that's marching by to come stop and help them remove this heavy tree log out of the way. And after some time they removed it. And then George Washington came back to the commander or the NCO, that's the sergeant or corporal, whatever, and said to him, next time, when you have problems, I think let's say you have problems. He says, next time when you need help, call the commander in chief, and I will come. So that kind of put him in place. So this is an example of humility, right? That George Washington, as the commander in chief, of the colonial army, is willing to do, whatever he asked people to do or he ordered people to do, right? So that's a true leader, right? That's a true leader. It's someone who is willing to do what he or she orders other people to do. Yeah, that's one of the hallmarks of being a true leader. And also it's humble, it's humility. And yet he's the commander in chief. Right? He could have ordered people around and stuff like that and whatever, but yet he's still very humble. So I mean, and there are other stories relating to style, like actual historical, when he, I don't know if those days they were called running for president. When he was being appointed a president, he chose to only stay, in office for 2 consecutive terms. And that's sort of like established precedence. That's the precedent because he was the first president. For in the future, to have future presidents to have only 2 consecutive terms. And I don't know if they made an amendment to the Constitution to do that, but I don't remember. I'm not a legal scholar, but or constitutional scholar. But anyway, that established the precedent. And also he, as a war hero, right? After winning independence, he rarely goes out in the public wearing his military uniform. He rarely does that. Okay, he rarely did that. He's very humble. Okay, so that's an example. All right, the very first president of the U.S. Okay, so when you contrast. That's the founding, right? This is the founding. He's the founding father, we say, founding father, founding president, okay, of the U.S. Contrast his, we could say his humility or his humbleness, his meekness to today's politics. My God, I think today, especially today, whether it's at the federal, state, or local levels, I think many of these leaders, these so-called elected leaders, have a lot to learn from the example of George Washington. right? I think I can be safe in saying that, right? Okay, so that's what's lacking today. All right, so that's a very it's not a well-known story, because his other story about the cutting the cherry tree, not lying about it or something like that, or is more probably more common, more popular, but this is not a well-known story. But anyway, so we can learn from that, right? That's humility, right? So anyway, all right, okay, all right. So the deeper meaning is of God, what's this? Of what? Over or above the people. That's being a bodhisattva. Yeah, that's what it means. Yeah, bodhisattva. Because bodhisattvas are very what? They're humble. They what is their goal? The goal is to help others to become enlightened too, right? Enlightened beings. Now, in future chapters, I think chapter 68, 69, we also will mention about bodhisattvas. Okay, I mean, or the qualities of a bodhisattva. Okay, or the all right, or the attributes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So okay. So additional meaning of the first line, okay, is that on the internal side, the Buddha nature yields to one's mind and will. Okay, that's the noun, not the verb, and will, mind and will. Okay, because it is inherently modest, humble. Our Buddha nature. Okay, it has no. Why is it? Why is that so? Why is it inherently modest or humble? Because the Buddha nature has no ego, does not possess, and is neither arrogant nor selfish. Okay, it doesn't possess. That means it has no. Doesn't want to possess or dominate, or it has no ambitions to possess or anything. Okay, and it's neither arrogant nor selfish. Okay, it is reflected by the conscience. Being over the people means to be a bodhisattva, where the Buddha nature is the authority, is in charge. You can say, okay, it's the master. Okay, or the source of one's thoughts or mind, without having any arrogance or ego. Okay, so that's the deeper meaning, the higher level meaning, the internal side. Okay, aspect. You can say the metaphysical side. Okay, all right. So because the virtues manifested by the Buddha nature, that's what the sages represent, okay, or the metaphor for, are from the Tao, where all the virtues are already self-equipped, or you can say innate, okay, or inherent. Then whatever is spoken will naturally and spontaneously be humble, okay, all right, and conform or be in accord to Tao principles. They will not resort to sophistry, which is, intellectual cleverness, all that stuff, okay. Thus all peoples, thus all thoughts, that's the people, serve the sage or serve the Buddha, or are in accord with the Buddha nature. Okay, so that's the higher level meaning of this section. Okay, well, all of those two lines, the first two phrases. Okay, now let's talk about the third and fourth phrases. Okay, third, fourth phrases: wishing to be in front of people. Remember that the first half of this section is talking about over people, right? Over. Okay, being authority, having authority. Okay, then the second one is to be in front. That means to lead. Okay, so one's over, authority, and one's leading. Okay, all right. So the second line is this. On the external level, now he's talking about sages, right? They are always humble and serve others. They end up being the leaders because well-informed people appreciate this virtue and thus are willing to, let the sages be leaders. So now I have to qualify. I say well-informed people, okay? Because then there are also people, people say, oh, we are a democracy. We have, elections, where the masses, or people who are who wish to vote can vote for whoever they choose, right? So that's called democracy. That's called freedom, right? Okay. But you can be ill-informed. You can be ignorant, literally ignorant, and still vote, and may not be the best choice, right? Okay, so democracy in itself, you can say the mechanism or the process of democracy itself does not necessarily lead to positive results. It's not a direct correlation. You can say it's more likely, or it has more opportunity, okay, to potentially lead to better. But look at it. Okay, look at the politics throughout the world. You have quote unquote democracies electing authoritarians, right? electing, people who want to be, dictators, except that they did it in a quote unquote democratic manner, right? Okay, so that's why. So that's why that's a result. That result, even though it's democracy, the process is democratic, right? You have different parties or whatever, running, people, stuff, but the masses, the people, are not well informed, or they did so, not in their best interest, whatever. Okay, so all right, so okay, so that's why we have to say, I have to qualify that. Okay, so another way of saying is that sages live to serve. That's to place themselves last, not to lead, but still end up leading, being in front. Okay, that's a direct quote from, or direct reference to chapter 7, 5th phrase. Therefore, the sages place themselves last, but end up in front. Okay, so once again, selfless. Okay, so and it makes sense, because remember, people are inherently good, but if you are so engaged in biases, or so dwelling in either hatred or whatever, that means you're not well informed. You're biased. You're not true. Okay, so therefore, whatever choices you make, in this case, we say electing people, right? Even though there may be a person that's virtuous, that did the right thing, but because of your prejudices, biases, or misinformation, or ignorance, just outright ignorance, okay, you may not elect or choose that virtuous person to be a leader, right? Okay, so we've happened just in the previous election cycle, or 2016, et cetera, right? I mean, come on, okay? So that's proof, okay? That's a proof, okay? All right, okay. So, okay, the deeper meaning of what's to be in the back. Okay, literally this body in the back. I mean, we have right here, okay, definition. But anyway, it just means this is more higher level, more individual. It's that sages place their sensory organs and consciousness, that is the six senses, last. Okay, so that's what it means by placing themselves last. Yes, physically, yes, sages do not, are not arrogant, so that they, or have no ego to want them to be in front of everybody, right? In the front of everybody. But this also means that they value, that they place their six senses or six consciousness, in the back, last, or that's their last. In other words, it's not the least important, okay, for them, all right, to have that. It has to do with being attachment, attached to the to things, okay. So because that's what six senses create, attachments, right? The six attachments. Okay. So anyway, all right. So okay. So another meaning is that on the internal side is that our Buddha nature, that's the sages. Sages is a metaphor to Buddha nature, does not contend or strive with the world. It's the world, and it's the world that is the phenomenal realm, which contends or strives with our Buddha nature. So that means they compete. You can say compete. That's one way of saying, okay, compete. The sage, our Buddha nature does not compete with the phenomenal world, with the space time, with the phenomenon. It doesn't compete with them. It tries to be in accord with them, right? Conform to them, right? Being harmony. Rather, it's our phenomenal realm, okay, that competes with our Buddha nature, right? It wants to take over our six senses, right? It wants to be the master, take over from our Buddha nature, right? Take over from our conscience, our true nature, et cetera, okay? So as kings of the valleys, our Buddha nature is the source, or that's being in front of our thoughts. That's the people, okay? So that's, okay. We're gonna reiterate this in the last section. Let's see, is it in the last section? No, in the next section. Okay, so anyway, so further understanding is this. Okay, since the Buddha nature is intrinsically pure, that's natural, unblemished, unperturbed, calm and untroubled, non-conditioned, changeless, permanent, and self-sufficient, that's self-dependent, thus it precedes all thoughts, right? Because the thoughts are conditioned, right? They're conditional. You see something you like, then you have thoughts about it, right? Or you hear something you like, you have thoughts about it. So that's dependent, right? So those thoughts are dependent on something else. but the Buddha nature is not. Okay, so that's very important. All right. So therefore, the Buddha nature precedes, it's in front of everything. Or you can say in this case, the source, okay, of our thoughts. Make sense? Of the people. Okay, that's another way of saying. So that's how the sages are in front of people. Same idea, right? One is on the physical level. This is more on the metaphysical level. Okay. So for example, so the 4 attributes of manifestations are Buddha nature. Let's go to Appendix B. That's from section 4 of our chapter 58. Okay, section 4. All right, we repeat it. Let's go. Okay. All right. Okay. Oops. Okay. The 4 attributes or manifestations of a sage. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. That's from section 4. Okay. Of chapter 58. You can look at it. Okay. So in section 4, we're saying, try to emulate the sages. That's one of the teaching points there. Okay. So first one is being upright. Fang. Okay. Literally it means square. This means square. I mean this is one definition. Okay. Square. Okay. So always act honorably, morally, and responsibly. Okay. But not forcing their standards on other people. So that's what this means. Okay. Fang er bu ge. All right. Okay. So that means, the sages in themselves, okay, or, our Buddha nature, we have to have our own, you can say, moral code or ethics or, okay, etc., morality, etc. So we follow that. We're in conformance. We're in accord with that because that's Tao principles. But we don't force that standard or those, you say, mores or, etc., ethics on other people. So that's being not scathing. Okay, so in this case, you won't be holier than thou. Okay, or you won't impose your will on other people. Okay, so that's very interesting. So it's like very passive. Okay, all right, and also it's incorruptible. Okay, the sage. This is the attributes of the sage. Okay, remember these are all manifestations. Okay, so it just means having integrity and modesty. Right, this is one of the 8. What's got the 8 bada, right? 8 virtues, right? Okay, I think it's virtues. Yeah, lian, right? This is lian. Okay, so not shortchanging anyone monetarily or otherwise. That's not piercing part. Okay, so that's what it means. It's incorruptible. Okay, all right. Then also we're straightforward. It means honest. It just means honest. Okay, so being honest and direct. Okay, we don't beat around the bush or we don't, go out in a very indirect means. Okay. All right. Okay. We don't sneak around people's backs, stuff like that. Okay. So we express yourself in a direct and simple way, but not ruthless, not recklessly though. Okay. Not ruthlessly, like just speaking your mind. Yeah, I'm being direct. Well, that's okay. So this is being direct in a very specific way. Okay. All right. You're not ruthless. You're not reckless. You're not doing it maliciously. Right. Some people are saying, oh, I'm being honest, but they're being malicious. Get it? Okay, so the two, all right? Okay, so we have to be careful. All right, then illuminated. Okay, what's illuminated? It means having clarity and wisdom. So that's when the Mahaprajna shines through. Okay, that's when our innate divine wisdom shines through. Okay, so I mean, there are very different levels of wisdom. Obviously, the highest level is from our Buddha nature directly. Okay, but there are other levels. Okay, so but when you have that wisdom or that clarity, that insight, if you will, vision, whatever, but that insight and vision and clarity has to be soft and soothing. It's not flashy. You're not displaying it you're not flaunting it for your ego or whatever, and you don't dazzle. That means you don't blind others with your brilliance. Okay. So that's what it means. Okay. All right. So let's go back to appendix. Oops. Okay. So that's where are we? Okay. This is a summary. This is appendix B. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So the implication is this: on the external level. Oops. On the external level. Okay. Where's the Okay, yeah. On the external level, the arrogant care only for themselves. That's the selfish, the people who have big egos. Whereas only the humble have the right temperament to take care of everyone, right? Right temperament. So well-informed people, once again, well-informed people or the non-ignorant people understand this and look for this virtue in their leaders. Okay, so that's even though it's a democracy, you still have to have well-informed people or people who are not ignorant, in other words, or are not biased or stuff like that. Okay, or not ideologically contrived or stuff like that. Okay, or monetarily contrived or whatever. Okay, all right. So on the internal side, okay, the Buddha nature innately does not contend, does not compete or strive. So it places itself last, just like the sages. Okay, so while ordinary humans allow their sensory consciousnesses to be the masters, to take over, and therefore direct their bodies or their actions, their bodies, their thoughts, words, and actions. Okay, all right, that's what the bodies represent: thoughts, words, and actions. Okay, now there's a very similar line in the Bible. Okay, in the Bible, yeah. I mean, now Jesus is talking about more on the spiritual side, obviously, and he's talking about being a servant of God. That's the mainstream interpretation usually of this line. If you hear these sermons, from about this verse. So verse 26 from the Gospel of Matthew. So whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Verse 27, and whoever wants to be the first among you must be your slave. Okay, so that's a Chinese here. I mean, this is the new, what do you call that? The new world standard or something like new standard. Not the King James. I think it's the New King James version. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're different, different translations, but it doesn't matter. So the key is it came from Gospel of Matthew. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So now Jesus is talking about, obviously, on a you can interpret as a very specific, very narrow aspect of saying that you want to be. If you want to be the leader of men, of the people, okay, you have to be a servant of God, stuff like that. Okay, so okay, so or whoever wants to be first among you must be a slave. That means the leader has to serve, the followers. Okay, so that's another way of saying. All right, okay, all right. So, okay, so the key point is this: on the internal level. Okay, yeah, this is all internal. Okay, so let's see. Let's do the whole thing. The Buddha nature does not dominate a person's mind or will. It lets people decide for themselves, or the thoughts decide for themselves who they want to be. It is important to understand that our sensory organs all strive to outdo one another, compete against each other. Okay, the idiom is to strive to be first and fear being left behind. That's what this means. Okay, all right. So we need to understand this from the standpoint of the truth that all these are false forms. Whatever our sensory organs, perceive are false forms. For there is no need to contend them or to compete for them or to strive for them, so that we are able to inspire our Buddha nature to request it to be our master, or to let it be our master, to have authority over our thoughts, the people, okay, such that it will manifest itself completely. Then that is placing ourselves last, but end up in front. That is everlasting, okay, all right, because we're coming from the ultimate true source, which is the Buddha nature. So that's always lasting, right? That's always the truth, okay? All right, let's do this section 3. Okay, so I don't have that much time left. 15 minutes. Okay, so thus sages are positioned above, but people do not feel burdened. The sages, are positioned in front, but people do not feel harm. Okay, so the previous section 2, talking about sages that are going to be above and in front, right? So now then say, so even when sages are then above, end up being, having authority, you can say, okay, over people, and also, but the people don't feel burdened by that. And when the sages are leading the people in the front, people do not feel harmed. Okay, all right. So those are the results. Okay, so the first line on the external side level is that sages are placed in a position of power. That's above, position above. But the people are not burdened by them because sages do not impose their will on the people. Right? Remember the 4 attributes of the sages, right? Same idea. Okay. All right. right? So conversely, poor leaders, the arrogant or egoistical, selfish ones, impose on the people below them. So they burden the people with some of the following. I mean, these are some examples. They make bad when the arrogant, selfish, egomaniac leaders, whatever, make bad decisions. They force people to figure out how to mitigate their negative impact of such act. They tell them, hey, even though it's they won't admit the mistake themselves, but they will tell other people, hey, go fix it, go fix the problem, right? Okay, so they dominate, they order people around, right? Okay. Two, they interfere with processes they do not understand. They cause confusion, creating unnecessary, right? They like to meddle, right? They like to, because of their ego, all right? They like to interfere, because it's all about them, right? So even though they may not understand something, the process, they still like to interfere, okay? All right. And then throwing temper tantrums and making egocentric demands, it ends up creating a toxic and hostile environment that reduces efficiency. Okay, you can say this is also in business world, and applying to business, not just in the world of politics, but also in the business world. Okay, very much so, right? We see this every day, right, in the business world, right? Okay, now sages, on the other hand, are the opposite. Okay, so one, they think out their decisions. Okay, they think it through. Okay, so they ask for input in order to take different perspectives in account. So they don't just have a one-track mind, if you will, or just one perspective. Okay, even though they follow the Dao, the Dao principles, they still consider other points of view. Okay, from put themselves in other people's shoes, okay, or whatever, okay. And also they refrain from interference. They empower people. They're not domineering, okay. So they prefer to trust the people with their proven skill sets and do not try to change things without thoroughly understanding the process, right? So they're more, you can say they're more hands-off, if you will, okay, hands-off, because they have faith or they trust, the people to make their, to follow their good judgment and make proper decisions. Okay, it's only when they don't, then they have to step in. Right? Okay, so two is, okay, encourage and nurture. They know that positive reinforcement is far better than negativity or criticisms or finger pointing, et cetera, right? Or passing the buck, okay, stuff like that. Right? So rather they're encouraging and nurturing. Okay, so that's like the water, right? They okay, so because of the above factors and more, the people who work under a sage-like superior do not feel burdened, right? So I mean, come on. I mean, let's take a choice. Do you prefer this or do you prefer this? I think for most people, vast majority of people prefer this, right? The second choice, right? As opposed to first, okay? So because of that, then people working under the sage do not feel burdened at all, right? Okay, makes sense? All right, so further, now that's the external side. On the internal side is when our Buddha nature, that's the sage, right, is our master, our thoughts, the people, are no longer controlled or burdened by the 6 desires of consciousness. Okay, all right. Okay, so now let's look at the second half of this section. It's just about sages are positioned in front, people do not feel harmed. Okay, so on the external side, sages lead, that's positioned in front, but people are not harmed by their leadership. Okay, so another way of saying is that conversely, poor leaders, that's the arrogant ones, selfish ones, they cause harm to the people they want to lead due to the following. I mean, these are just some examples, and this is not all inclusive, but this is just an example, some of a sampling. Okay, so lead in an unwise direction. Those egomaniacs, those, it's all about them, so they don't have the wisdom. Never mind. Okay, so one which presents difficulties are in that, because some people say, oh, this is easy, because they're so egomaniac. They think, oh, this is so easy, let's do this instead, and then boom, okay, then we have problems, and then okay, so that's not wise. It just means unwise. Okay. 2, when things turn out badly, now, because of the unwise decision, when things turn out badly, they will not accept responsibility. Instead, point the blame of everyone, right? It's not my fault. Okay. It's always somebody else's fault. Okay. Then and then on the other hand, if, let's say, by chance, even it may be an unwise decision or whatever, or a very impulsive decision, if it turns out well, they take all the credit and glory while expecting everyone else to do the work, which causes morale to plummet, right? So these are usually the traits of a poor leader, right? Of a very, you know, ego-driven leader. Okay. Now, on the other hand, sages are the opposite. Okay, they do their due diligence in direction choice. Okay, while aware that no decision can ever be perfect, sages determine the most sensible direction that increases the likelihood. And this flows from here, okay, right, from the previous line about they ask for input, right? So they consider all, okay. So all right, so they have more input, more input, more perspectives, so that they can make better choices. All right, okay. So when things, but once again, things may not always, it's not never 100% accurate, and also does not always turn out 100% good, right, or desired. So, when things do happen, bad things or negative things happen, sages are prepared, and they have contingencies for worst case scenarios. So they are prepared. They have like plan B, plan C, or whatever, backup plan, stuff like that. Okay, all right. Then, and this flows out from here too, obviously, right? I mean, from the first one, right? They have different inputs. All right. So, okay. All right. So then when things turn out well, they are happy to let the people take a well-deserved credit, right? It's all about the team, right? It's not about me, right? So that's, that comes from, that comes from encourage and nurture. All right. Okay. So, all right. Okay. So these other factors ensure that sages will never do more harm than good in the leadership capacity, I think. Yeah, leadership capacity. Okay. All right, in a leadership capacity. All right. Okay. So the further understanding is that on the internal side, when our Buddha nature is our leader, our thoughts are not harmed by the afflictions or the negativity that results from the 6 desires of consciousness. Okay, so that's the internal side, the metaphysical side. Okay, all right. So the implication on the external is this. Okay, all right. This is why people would prefer for sages to lead. That is to push sages to the front, because people see the sages are not self-serving. Okay, they're not driven by their ego, but rather helping and guiding others for the benefit of everyone. It is not the goal of sages to lead, yet they end up leading or being in front because they live to serve others and not themselves. So that is, sages are selfless and selfish. So for differences between power-based, that's the ego-driven, okay, leadership style, and servant leadership. Let's look at Appendix C. Okay, so playing a supporting role in the background. Okay, that's what servant leadership. I mean, this seems like an oxymoron, right? Because a servant, how can a servant be a leader, right? Servant is it's not the master, right? A leader is the master. So it's like, so anyway, that's what Lao is talking about. So now let's first talk about what's a power-based leadership. Okay, that's very ego-driven. Okay, so there's some of these are not everything all inclusive, but they're just some common characteristics. One, they're very egoistic. They focus primarily on self-interest rather than the interest of anyone else. Then they're also very judgmental. It's all about who's wrong, who's right, and who's to blame. Okay, and they're also very coercive. Okay, they like to boss people around, get things done by forcing, ordering, and bossing people around. They like to be, my way or the highway, stuff like that. Okay, very coercive. Okay, almost like bullying type. Okay, bullying method. Okay, and also they feel entitled. They perceive themselves as the rightful leader who should hang on to power indefinitely. All right, some are like that, very entitled. Okay, all right, and also they create a very toxic environment, so their relationships are very destructive. People cannot wait to get away as soon as they can get the chance. All right, so that's what a power-based, okay, ego-driven leadership style. Now, what's a servant leadership? Okay, remember, servant implies being humble. Okay, implies being humble, being in the back, behind, etc. Okay, all right. Some common characteristics are that servant, having the servant leadership quality means that you are empathetic. You listen. You put yourself in other people's shoes. Okay, you listen to understand how to. And also you want to heal. Okay, that's part of the nurturing aspect. Okay, because it's not about right or wrong. It's about proper nurturing, mentoring, stuff like that. All right. Okay. Awareness, you know oneself and also others, not just yourself, but also others. Okay. And it's about influence, not coercion, not bullying, not my way or the highway. It's about influencing means you can say it's a type of persuasion. It's a soft power. That's another way of saying it, okay? And then this is about vision, okay? You look ahead. You don't dwell in the past, okay? You learn from the past, but you always look forward, okay? Okay? So there could be setbacks, yes, or negativity, but you don't dwell in that, okay? So you learn from that and move on, right? Stewardship, that's how you manage things in stewardship. Understand it's only a temporary role. So when you're in charge, you realize that you're not in charge forever, right? It's only temporary, okay? Because either there's a situation or a need, et cetera, okay? And then you also encourage growth. That's the mentoring side, okay? Or you can say nurturing also. It raised the standard for everyone, okay? So. And then it's also about community, okay, about everybody. It builds relationships, fosters cooperation, okay? It's not just about you, okay, or a very few, okay? All right, so that's, what's this? Okay, so this is part C, Appendix C. Okay, so let's go back. We got one more appendix and one more summary, okay, part 2. All right, so the key point is, now that's the external side. Okay, now let's look at the internal side. The internal side is this. When our Buddha nature, the sage, is in charge, the thoughts, that's the people, are in accordance with the Dao principles. The thoughts are aligned with our conscience. Our thoughts are no longer oppressed or burdened or harmed by the afflictions of the sixth consciousness. So for some suggestions about cultivating humility, let's go to part 2 of cultivating humility. Okay, some suggestions. Okay, this is the second half, part 2. So keep the Dao of humility in mind. That is, anytime you begin to feel superior, like I know more than you, I'm better than you, et cetera, okay? Recall to mind that you had nothing to do in choosing your genetic heritage. None of that. Okay, so this is more on the physical side, right? Says, hey, I'm born into a wealthy family, or I'm born into a very upper class, higher status. That's you can say that's karma, okay? But you still you should understand that, I am this fortunate, or I'm this wealthy, or I have this much fame, or I have this much power or status. It's because it's karma. It's due to karma. It's not because that's a inherent right for me and not you. Okay, so that's because it's karma. All right. Okay. And then also make servant leadership your own. Okay. Now, what does that mean? That means you want to aspire not to wield power, but to serve something greater than yourself, to be of service to the community, okay, to your family, to the community, to the nation, et cetera, okay, to humankind. That's the highest level, okay. And also learn to be the other person's shoes, okay. So that's what that means. That has a lot to do with humility, right? Humility, or not about you, not about. I mean, it's a further extension of number 1, okay. Then emulate the past sages. Okay, who are the best examples living, maybe no longer living, but examples of people who are truly humble and yet they are leaders or true leaders. Okay, so we practice personal diplomacy. No matter how sure you are, keep certainty to yourself. Okay, that means it's not about who's right, who's wrong. See, so that so we have to be very cautious, even though you're right. So this is part of also don't speak your mind all the time, okay? Even though you're right, but because maybe at that situation, it's difficult you can't impose if you persist, and being that very rigid and follow that path, only you're right, then that could lead to negative consequences. Then it's best to step back and not pursue that. All right. Okay. So also leave plenty of room for the other person. That's for other person to learn and develop. Okay. To learn and develop on their own. All right. So you're not being domineering. Okay. So this all partly means you don't domineer, even though you are clear and you have wisdom, you have that brightness, right? But yet you don't glare. You don't glare. You don't flaunt and you don't glare. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is part 2. Okay. So let's go back. We're nearly there. I think we're nearly there. Oh, okay. Just summary 2. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. We're nearly there. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're at the last section now. Okay. Last 3 lines, last 3 phrases. Okay. So thus, the world is glad to push them, the sages, forward, but without resentment, okay? Because they do not contend, that is they, meaning the sages. So the world cannot contend with them, the sages, okay? All right, so let's go to the basic meaning. On the external level, okay, when there is a sage-like person who's humble, helpful, and supports everyone, well-informed people, that's people who are not ignorant or biased or whatever, okay, will naturally have the tendency to push that person from a support position in the back to a leading position in the front. Okay, so that's a natural, because that's well-informed people, or people who have, who are of good conscience, good intent, etc. Okay, so now on the converse, it says, now you're saying, hey, if this is the case, if this is true, how come we don't see this all the time, right? How come we still have bad results? Right? We have people, right? How come this doesn't happen? How come, we have people who are very humble, who are worthy, who are, not, who are not driven by their egos or ambitions, etc. And yet they're not, they're not leading, the people don't support them or don't, why? There's a reason why. This may not happen all the time for the simple reason the system, our political or social system, is broken or unstable. That's the main reason. So the process, even though it may be quote unquote democratic, but it's how can I say, I don't want to say it's perverted, but it's twisted. It's been twisted to favor either one side or one group or whatever. Okay, so that means the system is broken. Okay, or unstable. Okay, so that's why this doesn't happen. Okay, that's why this does not happen all the time. All right. Okay, so in a better or ideal Tao-centric world, real leaders can step forward, urged on by the people they support, who in turn provide support without all the corrupting influences. All right. Okay, so unfortunately, we're very far from this now. We kind of deviated. Okay. Anyway. All right. Okay. All right. There's too much to say about that. But anyway, now let's look at the internal side. The internal side is when the Buddha nature or the sage is the master, the thoughts of the people will naturally be in conformance with the conscience and Tao principle, and thus harbor no resentments, because all thoughts, the people, are not corrupted. They're no longer corrupted, perverted. They're not oppressed or burdened or afflicted or harmed by the 6 roots, material factors, the 6 consciousness, etc. Okay, so thus the thoughts are congruent with the Tao. Okay, okay, let's look about the last. We're talking about the last 2 phrases. Okay, so now the deeper meaning of not to contend. Okay, of do not contend. It's to be in accordance with one's conscience, to follow one's Buddha nature, to be in harmony with all. That's on chapter 55, all right? Literally utmost harmony, okay? 10th phrase. All right, now we're near the conclusion. Okay, so the second line, the last 2 phrases on the external side, it's this. It's because sages do not strive, do not compete or contend. There's nothing in the world that can contend with sages, whereas to strive is to respond with resistance and pushback, right? And this back and forth contention can quickly escalate out of control. So this phrase also appear in the 4th to the last phrase of chapter 22, okay? To hold, cherish oneness, okay? Just example, all right? Okay. So another meaning is the principle of non-contention has many levels, okay? And I just get these 2 broad ones. The one is absence of conflict, not arguing or fighting one another. That's the external side. It could be internal too, but anyway. And then 2, the internal side is peace of mind, no social competition or competing against one another to get ahead. I mean, it could be external too. It just means one is there's no contention going on, no arguing or debates or fighting, and then the other one is just there's a peace of mind. It means that everything is tranquil, it's peaceful, calm, all right? So one of the key marks of a genuine sage is non-contention. So there's nothing in the world that contends with the sage. Remember that came from the previous, in the previous section, the first line that says about the the Buddha nature does not contend with the world, but the world contends with the Buddha nature. Okay, same idea. Okay, same thing. All right. So on the internal side, so on the internal side is that our Buddha nature does not contend because it has no self, and is naturally non-attached, non-conditioned, non-dualistic, unperturbed, self-sufficient, and liberated. It's pure, that's unblemished, and changeless. It is perfect, so it has no need to strive for or contend with anyone or anything, okay, or compete against with anyone. So each day we face reality, we can face realities of the world without contending with the world by letting our Buddha nature be our master. Okay, so that's how we could do it. All right, so recall, okay, remember this previous section, our Buddha nature does not contend, strive the world. It's the world that contends with us. Okay, that's right. Okay, or strives with the Buddha nature. So here's the implication. Okay, is that on the external side, rather than head down the path of contention, debates, arguments, etc., sages stay above the fray. This is an advanced level of the Tao. Many people cannot achieve this. Without resistance to fight against, the other side cannot start anything, right? That's, yeah, right? So if the sages do not contend with the world, then the world cannot contend with the sages, right? On the internal side, our Buddha nature is congruent with the Tao, okay? So everything it manifests is in harmony with the Tao, with nature, and the world. So for some qualities of non-intention, this should be the last appendix. Oops. Okay, non-contention, right? We talk about just two broad levels. First is refer to absence. Right? Sages do not pick fights or arguments with them. So no one pick fights with them, right? So here's the key, all right? Just try to avoid picking fights, okay? Debating. That's why sages do not debate. You know, Jesus really doesn't like to debate. Buddhists definitely don't engage in debates. Confucius, very rare. Okay, I mean, they do have some, you know, back and forth and certain, but very rare. Okay, all right. So, and the reference second level is to refer to the peace of mind. Sages do not engage in a mad rush to fight to get ahead. So there's nothing to stress them out. Thus the world leaves them alone, right? They don't compete against the world. So the world cannot compete against them. Okay, so being at peace means being a person of peace, a person who brings peace, not the same as pacifism or turn the other way. Okay, we got to be careful that just because you are a peaceful person does not necessarily or automatically mean that you turn the other cheek. Doesn't mean that. All right. So it's like a soldier of peace. Okay. So yeah, you're peaceful, but you're a soldier of peace. Okay, something like that. Okay. All right. So the path of balance and moderation between extreme aggression, that's provoking conflict, and extreme cowardice. See, so that's non-contention. Okay, non-contention is a path of moderation between extremes, between extreme aggression and also cowardice. Okay, so just bear that in mind. That's what non-contention really is. All right. Okay. So let's go to, let's see, we're at the conclusion. Time is almost up. So let's go to, we're at the conclusion now. Okay. So, all right. So here's the key point. Okay. This chapter points out to us a key point, that the reason why those who are congruent with the Tao, aka sages, okay, that's the rivers and oceans, okay, can be the leaders of people, that's the 100 valleys, is because externally, okay, because sages follow the Dao of humility, that's to speak humbly. They help and support people, that's to place themselves behind. Where sages are not burdensome nor harmful, all because sages do not contend with the world. Okay, whereby not contending with the world, they are able to have authority over people. That's the position above, and become their leaders. That's position in front. Where non-contention is harmony arising from the balance and the avoidance of those extremes. Remember, right? Extremes between extreme aggression and cowardice, right? Or low self-esteem, etc. Okay, all right. That's external side. Internally, our Buddha nature does not contend with the world because sages hold on to the one, or the oneness. Or another way of saying is to be in accordance with their Buddha nature. Whereas we contend with the world when we are not in accordance with our Buddha nature, or we are not at one, okay, with the Tao. So where by being at one with the Tao, we do not contend with the entire cosmos, is called the virtue of non-contention. That's in chapter 68, a future chapter. We'll talk about that in our second to the last line, where our thoughts are not oppressed or nor afflicted by the 6 roots, that is by the phenomenal material world. Okay? Okay? Where non-contention is about both non-violence and serenity or stillness within our minds. This is already the most surpassing. This is the highest. This is because of the virtue of humility. Where this virtue of humility is why goodness stays low, because sages are congruent with Tao. This is why rivers and oceans, that's the sages, can be the kings of 100 valleys. Okay, I'm finished. Thank you very much. I went a little over, but anyway, if there's anything that I said incorrectly, I ask for the Buddhas and Lao Tzus for their guidance and everyone's guidance. Thank you.